Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good afternoon. My name is Kirsten Wiley, and I'm here today to introduce and welcome Gina Rudan, who is visiting us as part of the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. Gina is here today to discuss her book, Practical Genius, The Real Smarts You Need to Get Your Talents and Passions Working for You. What if you can tap into a practical genius that will unleash your full potential and bring fulfillment to both work and life? Find the sweet spot between your skills and your creative passions to change the game and become extraordinary. Gina has been a guest lecturer, trainer, and strategist for organizations including Fannie Mae, the Stern School of Business at NYU, and for the Endeavor organization. She was awarded the 2009 March of Dimes Women Living to the Fullest Award and was recently selected as one of Potter Magazine's top 20 under 40 Hispanics in the U.S. Please join me in welcoming Gina to Microsoft.
Hello. Does anyone want to move closer? I promise I won't bite. Are we good? Everyone's comfy in their corners? Okay, so this will be a non-traditional experience. You'll hear a New York accent, so let's just get that out the way. I am from New York. I live in Miami, and I'm humbled and grateful to be here. This is a huge honor, so thank you for having me. My first book debuted 2 weeks ago, so I'm riding on excitement. This is my West Coast tour. And in 30 minutes, I'm going to inspire you to consider some alternatives to how you're working and living and playing and creating. So enjoy the journey, and then we will have a discussion with a Q&A. So you're ready? Okay. Before we begin, I want you to turn to the person next to you and say, regardless of what my ego says, I see the genius in you. Regardless of what my ego says, I see the genius in you. Now, it's interesting doing that at Microsoft because you all are card-carrying geniuses. So I'm going to redefine genius a bit, but I like to start with that so that everyone gets in the framework that I'm arguing that genius is a choice and we all possess it. So entertain that concept for the next 30 minutes. Before we begin, because this is R&D, I thought, let me do some research. I write about the history of genius, so I'm just going to speed through. Where did this beautiful word begin? Originally, the Latin root word for genius was genie, to be born with great spirit. And I thought that was a wonderful definition, and the Greeks were onto something, believing that each one of us innately is born with great spirit. I couldn't agree more. But then these guys came along, and they decided to redefine genius. And Joseph Addison was a writer, and he wrote the first paper on genius in 1711, and he argued that there were two kinds of geniuses in the world. The first, those that were born with an extraordinary ability, and he argued that Shakespeare was an example of true genius. Of course, a writer, I recognize his bias there, but he really did also argue that people could learn to become genius, and he used Aristotle as an example of someone that worked hard to become what he defined as genius. Now, Sir Francis Galton, who was also Darwin's half-cousin, he really did us in that he argued, and the definition has pretty much remained the same, that anyone born with an extraordinary ability, particularly in the areas of IQ, had a genetic advantage. And he is the one who coined the phrase nature versus nurture. And he argued that it's all about nature. And his obsession was to improve the breed of man. He also was the creator of racial hygiene, which is a whole nother talk. Sir Francis Galton, in my mind, had some issues. But again, we're not going to go there. But he also invented the fingerprint. He was obsessed with compartmentalizing and grouping people based on genetic makeup. Fast forward, and I've decided I'm redefining genius. And people have asked me, well, Gina, you can't just go around and redefine genius. And as writer, my answer is, of course I can. But I'll give you the backstory, the personal story, the real story of why I've set out to redefine genius. For 15 years, I was a corporate global marketer. Huge, wonderful success. I worked at Avon. I launched Avon in Espanol while I was there. Then I went on to be a senior director with PR Newswire and ran their global marketing division for 10 years. And 4 years ago, I went to have a pretty routine corrective eye surgery and got a rare infection. And I lost my sight. And it always takes something radical like that, a life change, to get you to reflect on the life you really want and the work that you really want to be immersed in. And for 4 days, I was blind, slept in a guest room, away from my son, my husband, and my cat. And during that temporary blindness, all I could do was listen to TED Talks. How many of you are TED fans? Of course, every single hand. Love it! So, similar to yourself, whenever I get a free moment, I would listen to TED.com. When I lost my sight, that's all I could do. And I realized that if I got my sight back, I would quit my job. I had listened to, I don't know if you've ever watched Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor's talk. Her talk is called Stroke of Genius. I highly recommend it. It was like life-changing talk for me. And after listening to her talk in particular, I knew if I got my sight back that I would quit my job and dedicate my time, my passion, my energy to my writing. I was a literature major, but everyone advised me, Gina, don't become a writer, you'll be broke. Gina, the only way to get out of the hood is to put that writing aside and get a corporate job. My mother worked in a mailroom for 37 years on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. The mailroom, though, was in the basement of Columbia University. So I grew up on that campus. And I knew that I wanted to be on many campuses. So fast forward, I'm not going to digress. I got my eyesight back, thanks to a wonderful surgeon. And 4 years ago, on the first day of the recession, I quit my job with no writing experience, had never even published an article, and set out to do research, which for me consisted of over 100 interviews, one-on-one interviews, across 5 industries, focus groups, and surveys on redefining genius. So one, so that more people can honor their passion and not compromise a passion for a skill, which I did as a corporate executive. And to encourage people, especially young people, to realize that we all do possess genius and everyone has an idea worth sharing, and why can't I inspire more people to step up on that TED stage? In 2010, I spoke at TED Global. So imagine that. Here's someone, no experience, quits her job, sets out to do some research, writes a book, and I'm going to go through my definition of genius, and ends up speaking at the conference that inspired her to risk it all. So that's the credibility, guys. Because a lot of people will ask, what gives you the right to redefine? That's what gave me the audacity to redefine this beautiful word. And here's my definition. It's simple. So I've redefined genius in a practical way. My definition is practical genius, and it's based on 6 simple ingredients. And to make it really easy for folks to understand, I've divided the 6 ingredients into 2 buckets. The first bucket are the soft personal assets. This is who you are on the weekends. These are values, creative abilities, and passions. Second set are your hard professional assets. This is what got you here to Microsoft, your strengths, your skills, your area of expertise. I believe we've all been conditioned since probably the 3rd grade to focus on the hard assets. But maybe we've compromised the soft assets. How many of you feel that you have tilted too far towards the hard assets throughout your life? More than half. How many of you feel that maybe you've tilted too far towards your soft? Not at Microsoft, yeah. Some organizations are like play heavy, the advertising agencies. Well, Gina, I don't know about this. I think I've tilted too far towards the soft, so that's interesting. I believe that genius resides at the intersection between the hard and the soft. And that, I mean, is like simple. I've been up here, 5 minutes? That is the simple hypothesis that I'm offering today, is that we all do innately possess genius. A lot of us don't know where to find it. I provocatively write about this as your other G-spot, and that was the title of my TED Talk. But this G being for genius, I can't hide who I am. I'm provocative, so I speak the language that I'm comfortable with, even at Microsoft. And that's part of my expression of genius. Whatever your expression is, I'm encouraging you to consider what life and work looks like, not tilted. More than half of you raised your hands and said, I've tilted too far towards the hard assets. So I'm going to encourage you in the next 20 minutes together to really consider what life and work would look like if you did not compromise the values, your play, your passions, or creative outlets. So how can I prove that this hypothesis is true? Last week, Fast Company, did you guys see this article? So just last week, Fast Company put out this great piece on just highlighting folks that have dropped out of high school or college and have done really well and have shared genius. And for me, a lot of these examples are practical genius, because IQ does matter. I'm not knocking that. But I think emotional intelligence matters as well. And that's what the soft assets do if you find the time to cultivate them, is that you're able to grow and harness and build upon your emotional intelligence. All of you have phenomenal IQs, I'm sure of it. How's your EQ doing? How's your EQ doing? So neuroplasticity, in preparing for my book tour, I had dinner with the principal of my son's school who's doing research on neuroplasticity. How many of you know about neuroplasticity? There's a lot in education. There's tons of research available, but I encourage you to get a taste of this simple premise that the brain is able to grow and create new neural pathways through learning. So neuroplasticity argues this is how children learn. So traditional science has argued that the brain doesn't change over time, and once you become an adult, that's it. That's what you got. Can't really change it. But thank God, I consider this to be yummy science. Neuroplasticity has proven that the brain can change. But two things impact the change: environment and experience. So this is another piece of research to just encourage you to prioritize the experiences you have outside of work or in between work. And to consider diverse environments, because it really does help create additional pathways. So that's a proof point. In general, when people say, Gina, well, what is the purpose? Why did you set out to write this? And I think it's because many of us have allowed life to de-genius us. Bucky Fuller was an architect, an amazing futurist, an engineer, and he said, don't let life de-genius you. How many of you work 80-hour weeks? 70? We're in denial? We're hiding it. I know. I know. Life as an entrepreneur, very similar. You really don't shut off. So, what de-genius us? Routine. We need to watch the routine and really change it up as much as we can. Information stress. I interviewed Chris Anderson, the curator of TED, and I said, what is your biggest fear? And he said, information overload. And he even believes that some of us will get terribly ill because we do not manage the amount of information we consume. Whether you agree or disagree, I really encourage you to watch how much information you consume and recommend shutting down, even if it's just an hour before you transition from work to play. So after speaking to Chris Anderson and also David Rowan, who's the publisher of Wired magazine in the UK, he also wrote significantly about information stress. So starting to highlight it. Life without passion, play, or creativity. How many of you are going to play this weekend? Scheduled play. Great. Okay, we are in Seattle. I like it. This area, I saw the soccer field yesterday, and I said, okay, maybe they are playing here. Some cities I go to, there's no play. Can some of you just shout out what your play source is? How are you defining play?
Sports.
Sports?
Dancing.
Dancing.
Xbox.
Xbox. Excellent. Yoga.
Karaoke.
Karaoke.
Poker.
Poker. I'm impressed. Children. Spontaneous play. That's hard. Silence. So Dr. Brown, who's a play expert, it's another good TED Talk, argues that spontaneous play, similar to how animals engage in play, really is healthier than scheduled play. And I really have to push back on that because I'm like, if I don't schedule the play, it doesn't happen. Yesterday, I scheduled play throughout Seattle, and I enjoyed the sculpture garden and went to Pike Place Market and loved that. And I had to schedule my day of play. I'm traveling with my husband and my 5-year-old. But thank God I scheduled it because I got to play, and it was wonderful. So scheduled play is good, but if you can find some spontaneous play, do it. Checking half of yourself at the door. So I think many of us live a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde approach to life, and as soon as we get on this campus, we may be checking half of our identity at the door. It could be we're hiding the playful side, the creative side. It could be hiding parts of our ethnic identities, and I'm saying, let's stop that identity crisis and begin to bring the whole self. As Daniel Pink would say, leveraging the whole mind, the left and the right, from a place of identity is also key. Sleep, I'm not going to talk to you about sleep, but I hope you guys are getting some. So within Practical Genius, the book, I just have 5. I go through the model in 5 areas, which is how to identify the 6 ingredients that contribute to your own genius. How are you expressing it? Who are you surrounding yourself with? How are you feeding your genius? And how to market. Again, I want to focus just on soft assets. So this is a picture of the Orpheus Symphony. The Orpheus Orchestra is based in New York. I saw them 3 weeks ago. They are the only conductorless orchestra in the United States, and they're phenomenal. I highly recommend seeing them. They do tour. But in spending time with them, I realized that one of the great things about hanging out with musicians is they're so creative. They improvise their experiences. They improvise with their work. But they also problem solve and they synthesize a great deal. So one of my recommendations in getting you to agree, so this would be your first homework, is to take on a creative outlet. How many of you have a creative outlet? So we talked about play, but what about creativity? Can you share what your creative outlet is?
Flowers.
Flowers. Floral design?
Floral design, gardening.
Wonderful, and gardening.
Yeah.
Other creative outlets? That's brilliant.
Writing.
Writing? Excellent. How many writers? Usually in R&D, there's a lot of writers. Yeah. Are we writing?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So as I'm an executive coach and obviously a trainer, but for homework, I'm going to ask each of you to find a creative outlet. And if you look at me and say, Gina, I really have no idea where to begin, you get permission to taste different creative outlets that you may be curious about. So for me, it was painting, and I took a painting class and loved it. I sucked at it, but I loved being able to say that I tried it and I engaged in my creative side. Writing, for me, that's my greatest passion. So whatever it is, I'm giving you a pass to taste different creative expressions so that you can cultivate. We're all sold here on why creativity matters today in business, right? I don't need to argue that. Okay. So Barbara DeVries, I wanted to share a case study around Practical Genius to give you an example of what Practical Genius looks like. This is a funny picture of Barbara. She's actually a fashion designer who's also a big advocate against plastic. And Barbara celebrated my 40th birthday with me this August, and we went out to eat, and she's a major plastic activist in Miami. And she ordered a stew, and it was supposed to come, basically served in parchment, but they served it in plastic. So I took this photo and I just thought the paradox, right? Go out to eat with Barbara and she's like the plastic queen, and here she is. Barbara's also a good friend of Margot. Here she is being served in plastic. But I'm going to use her as a case study because how she began her obsession with plastic is she would vacation every year in the Bahamas, and she started cleaning up the beaches and picking up plastic. And as she started to pick up plastic, which again was an expression of her values, her soft asset is wanting to clean up beaches, she one day decided to bring the plastic into her studio. She's a clothing designer, but created this. And she created this, what I'm wearing. So she took her hard assets as a designer and a businesswoman and launched her own company It's called Plastic is Forever. And Barbara, for me, is a great example of practical genius because she's honoring her values as an environmentalist. She's reducing the plastic imprint on many beaches, and she's creating something commercial and beautiful out of it. So I call her my great example of how to take, how to move from trash to treasure. So that's Barbara. This is how Barbara expresses her genius. How do you express your genius? Well, this is a picture of me speaking at Oxford University, and I share this story because I was an audience speaker. So how many of you have been to TED? Okay, homework, guys. Everyone should go to TED, at least by 2013, if it's sold out this year. But when you apply to attend TED and you're accepted, maybe 3 weeks later, they send out an email to all 750 attendees and asked, we're going to accept someone from the audience to share a paper or an idea worth spreading. And all of my friends thought, well, we're not going to submit. We'll never get picked. This is TED. And I said, you know what? I'm going to submit an article. And I submitted, and I was selected. And I thought, I cannot believe that I am speaking at Oxford, okay, sharing the redefinition of practical genius, and it was a phenomenal experience. They gave me just 3 minutes, and I spoke after 3 neuroscientists. Yes, okay? Puerto Rican from New York City, first woman in her family to go to college, passion for writing, ends up speaking after 3 neuroscientists. Like, talk about scary. This is a little intimidating, but that was really scary. But anyway, the point I want to make is all of you, each one of you should be sharing what your genius is and should be speaking on stages or at least on panels. How many of you share your research internally or are able to present or take it externally or to other departments? About 25%. Can I encourage everyone to please, even if it's just writing or a white paper, but once a quarter I recommend that everyone should be finding a platform to share and express their own genius. If I can do it, everyone here in R&D can do it. Third recommendation is surround yourself with genius. So when I quit my job, everyone thought I had a nervous breakdown. Everyone thought the blindness had messed me up. My husband thought I'd lost my mind. My parents definitely thought I went crazy. And I had to prove to them that this is going to work. And what I did is I made a list of 25 people I wanted in my life. And the first one was Daniel Pink. Do you know Daniel Pink? He's a great author, wrote a book. His most recent book is called Drive. But A Whole New Mind was a book that I read right after I got my sight back. And it changed my life. And I called him. And I said, can I meet with you and interview you? I'm quitting my job because of your book. And he said, oh, some crazy Latin woman is on the other line, but I'm concerned. So he actually invited me out to D.C., and I flew out to D.C. I have a great relationship with Daniel. He actually mentored me through my writing and helped me with my manuscript. But you have to take risk and figure out, who do you want? If I asked you, who's on your top 25 list, who would that be? And I went after each one of them. And I basically set out to surround myself with interesting minds, designers, scientists, writers, thought leaders, executives, CFOs, a couple of graffiti artists that I looked up to when I was a kid. I diversified that list and I went after them. I encourage other people that are cultivating and expressing their genius in a traditional or non-traditional way to think about who you're walking with. So types of relationships, I think everyone needs a Yoda. Yodas are basically our mentors and sponsors, especially within this environment. I hope every one of you has someone that has your back. Again, this is someone who will give you that candid feedback on your projects. A Yoda is critical. Ambassadors are connectors. People that are constantly introducing you to other people and are your cheerleaders. Ambassadors matter. My favorite group are fat brains. So I define fat brains as digital natives. These are young people under the ages of 30 who also should be mentoring you. Some people call it reverse mentorship. I have a board of advisors for my small business. They're all between the ages of 18 and 30. How many of you are under 30 in here? So we have about 10% fat brains right here available. Those of us over 30, find a fat brain to mentor you, I'm sure you surround yourself with fat brains in your personal life, but at work, I think fat brains matter. This is an important fat brain in my life. His name is Barrington Irving. I advise him, he advises me. He's the youngest pilot to fly around the world, and he did this when he was 23. And he grew up in Liberty City in Miami. And he has a great story because he had no resources and he set out to do this. He had met a pilot who mentored him, got his pilot license, and decided, he's 26 now, but when he was 23, to fly around the world. Example of practical genius because he accomplished that. He has a Guinness Book World Record. But when he came back, he realized the greatest result of that flight was inspiring other young people to consider STEM and to consider aviation. So what Barrington is doing today is and through Flight Simulator, which is a Microsoft product, he basically is able to, he started a program called Experience Aviation, and he teaches young people through, especially in financially deprived communities, through flight simulation, how to embrace aviation. And he's building a plane right now that's equipped to fly around the world again. And he's partnered with NASA so that he can reach about 1,200 schools while he's flying. And again, his mission is STEM. And I use him as another example of marrying and living at that intersection between what he's good at and what he loves. And of course, all the airlines, everyone has seeked him out. Even I heard rap artists were like offering him millions to be their private, they wanted Barrington to be their private pilot. But he turned down all of those opportunities for his commitment to teaching young people and pushing STEM forward in the US. Practical genius. We're almost there. Sustain your genius. This chapter of my book, the premise is that you have to fuel the body, you have to fuel the mind. How many of you are taking time to eat? Lunch breaks. This is not rocket science. You guys know this. The body, the mind, you need to fuel it. One new recommendation I have for all of you, though, is to fuel your genius before you fuel anything else. So especially when I work with executives, I encourage people to create a morning ritual. How are you starting your day off? Are you just grabbing a coffee and, maybe a half-toasted bagel and hitting your laptop? Start off in a healthy way. Create a morning ritual and feed yourself first. And consider what content you're consuming and reading in the morning. Last recommendation around fueling is, I took this at the W Hotel. I thought this was so funny because I talked about shutting down. Stress management is a choice. Design it your way. This is an executive who allowed me to take his photo, and he said, this is my way of dealing with stress. He loves his Kindle. He's in a pool. I say it's okay. Design it your way. This is Lucas. This is my 5-year-old in Coney Island 3 weeks ago. Again, I'm just going to stress the power of play. How many of you have young children? Yes. Don't they remind you of the importance of play? Take the time, get on the floor, travel with the Legos. Yes, they drive you crazy sometimes. My son almost got lost at the market yesterday playing hide and go seek with mommy. But it's a reminder that play is a powerful indicator for genius. And this is a closing visual around marketing paradox. So again, my premise is that dwelling in the intersection between your mind and your heart is a great place to live, and marketing that is a great starting point. I think we all possess paradox, and instead of trying to be something we're not and to live a kind of conditioned, safe, routine life of conformity, I'm saying out those differences within you. This is an architect in Miami who plays guitar, he loves to skateboard. He used to tag up when he was in high school, and he shared that with me. But he's an amazing, amazing mind, and also a mathematician, and loves numbers, and he's a great example of leveraging both sides. I'm encouraging all of you to leverage and to share and to market both sides of who you are. The mom alongside the researcher, the engineer alongside the chess master, the father alongside, the business leader. Bring it closer together. And service. So I'm the founder of TEDx MIA. This is my thank you to TED for helping me during my life change, and I put on this event 2 months ago. How many of you have a TEDx, have been to a TEDx event? Do you know what TEDx is?
In Seattle in like 2 weeks. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. Please support them. So TEDx events, there's 2,000 TEDx's around the world, and it's a volunteer effort where people basically take the TED brand and put on talks worth sharing in local communities. So if you're ever traveling on business or on vacation, there's a great map where you can end up catching a TEDx event in the city you may be visiting. So, in summing up, don't let life degenius you. IQ matters, but please pay attention to emotional intelligence. Find where your heart and mind intersect well. I promise you it's an interesting space when you dwell there. Consider identifying someone half your age to mentor you. Find a fat brains that are here. Mentor a Yoda. Fuel your genius before you dare fuel anyone else's. Leverage that paradox of who we are and live out legacy. So my big message is an inspiring one. I don't have hard evidence on why legacy matters, but I just feel that it does today more than ever. I had my life change. I'm asking all of you to consider practical genius as a lifestyle option so that you don't have to wait for something horrible to happen to make a shift in how you live and work and play and create and innovate. So that is my talk. I hope everyone stays in touch. We'll have a Q&A now. This was a huge honor, and I'd love to continue the conversation with all of you. It's not every day that a girl like me gets to speak to an R&D team at Microsoft, so thank you for this opportunity. And I stay to 30 minutes. Questions, comments, conversation? Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. That's really inspiring in a lot of ways. How does the practical aspects of living life, say, like being able to economically sustain yourself, fit into pursuing like your passions? I mean, I have passions that are hobbies, but at the same time, they're not quite professions. So I guess it's that niche, finding out that sweet spot in order to do that, or do you have trying to pursue it and see where that goes?
I have two recommendations. One is curating the opportunities for experimentation. So in interviewing a lot of young people, I always encourage them to bring the passions to the work or bring the work to the passions. So in some cases, that's possible. In others, it's not. I bet you here there are ways for you to bring those hobbies, and I hate the word hobbies because it seems like hobbies are not important when I really think they are. So I would encourage conversations around them. I would encourage you to figure out ways to bring it in. Into the workplace. I coached a CFO who also played in a band on the weekends and didn't let anyone know at his French company that he was on a band on the weekends until he decided to bring, it was a tech company, to bring some of the technology and marry it in his music and then use his stage presence ability into the boardroom. And he ended up outing that he was on a band on the weekends, and people embraced it, and his team came to see him perform. And he ended up writing and delivering talks on how he was able to use his ability as a performer and bring it into the boardroom. So there's ways to bring the soft side into the professional space, but you have to experiment to see where it works and where it doesn't work. But you test and play and take risk. And it starts with conversation first. Questions, comments?
So, Gina, it seems like such a scary thing to do, to make such a change, like to quit your job and bang, and you're on a whole new path, and you have no idea whether you're going to succeed or not. Mm-hmm. You know, with hindsight, it's a great story and everything, but what, was there a time when you thought, wow, this might not work, or you had doubts, or?
Oh yeah, every month, every month. So I did set myself up for success in that I had business advisors. I did set myself for success in that I had coaches to help me with the fear, who taught me that fear a lot of times is false evidence acting real. It's not easy going from safe corporate cocoon into entrepreneurship, but if you surround yourself with the right people and you really are relentless, You can sustain success, I believe, with the right relationships, you know, an incredible amount of bravery and risk, and just being diligent, being really, really diligent. How many of you, I don't know what the policies are here. Some companies, people are not allowed to start side ventures. At Microsoft, are you able to explore side ventures or no? Or there's not even the bandwidth or the time to do that, right? You're like, side ventures, are you crazy? No. So I encourage people to scratch entrepreneurially within their projects and within their ventures, and to, you know, give yourself diversified experiences internally. You don't have to. I met my CEO afterwards, and I write about this, and he said to me, why didn't you tell me that you wanted to write? You could have continued to work on your manuscript and stayed here. You didn't need to leave. And he was absolutely right. So a lot of times you can reinvent yourself in the context of the organization. You can explore other opportunities in the context of this campus. A lot of it is taking risk, trusting yourself, aligning yourself with the right people, and making a good strategic decision on what is the best place for you to exercise your genius. It's obvious that this was it for me.
I liked how you talked about how you connected with Daniel Pink, and you had your list of 25 people that you wanted to connect with. So tactically, was it a lot of just picking up the phone and saying, hi, this is who I am, come mentor me? Yeah.
It was scary. I will admit, and I'll talk about Kevin Carroll. How many of you know Kevin Carroll? He's in Portland. You guys should have him. He's brilliant. So Kevin Carroll, similar to Dan Pink, first it began with an email. I was too scared to pick up the phone. So first it was an email, and then it was a phone call. Some people don't have that fear and just are able to reach out. But absolutely, everyone I reached out to, and the list goes on. Kevin Carroll wrote a book called Rules of the Red Rubber Ball, and he's the catalyst for play. He was an executive at Nike for many years. He's brilliant. Highly recommend his book. He lives in Portland. And I reached out to him in the same way. You just have to come from what I call a non-transactional place. I wasn't asking, I didn't need anything from them. I wasn't asking them to hire me. I was only asking for an interview. So one, you will have absolute success because you have this brand also alongside you. If you enter these relationships with these amazing thinkers from a non-transactional place, people that go in with the, this is what I need from you and this is what you can get from me, that's a limited relationship. So as I went through the 25, I really approached it in a non-transactional way. And I also I wanted to spend time with Oprah Winfrey's life coach. Her name is Martha Beck. I don't know if you guys know Martha Beck. She writes a column that I love. And she was speaking at a conference, and I snuck backstage with my flip camera and said, can I interview you? I'm working on a manuscript on Genius, and I really love the work that you've put out. I interviewed her. She gave me a 5-minute interview, and at the end, she grabbed my arm and said, why don't you come with me to Arizona? And I said, oh, shit. Martha, oh my God, we're taping. Sorry, guys watching. My language. I went to Arizona, basically, and spent 4 days with Oprah Winfrey's life coach. And she was curating a Genius weekend for her 12 friends, and it was phenomenal. And from there, I just continued with this relentless determination. And what happens is all you need is one win. My win was Daniel Pink. After that, everyone was cake. The trick, though, is to sustain the relationships, and I do. So I send them articles, I send them cards, Dr. Christian Northrup, Chris Anderson, who I love. I mean, I can go down the list, but you really just identify who you want, approach them from the heart, not the mind, in a non-transactional way, commit to sustaining the relationship, and it's a simple model that works. And you just have to take that first step. Mm-hmm.
So knowing what you know now about the area of success you found in this niche, would you, looking back, if you could go back, would you have done that a lot sooner?
Absolutely. Why did I wait to go blind to write? In college, I got a scholarship and studied at Regent's College in London. And I loved literature, and I could have started this path so much earlier, but I just didn't. I just didn't. And you're absolutely right. You have to listen to that intellectual curiosity. You guys know this as researchers, but do you do it in your own life? Do you do it in your own life? Sometimes it's great to kind of turn the lens onto thyself so that you don't let time pass. Absolutely, I should have did this much sooner.
So obviously you had a lot of your own anxieties about taking the big step and divorcing yourself from your path to go on a different one. How did you handle your spouse's reaction to that? Because I imagine they too were full of anxiety and fear and all of that. So how do you bring a spouse along?
My husband is from Croatia. So just to give you context. So we have a non-traditional relationship to begin with. It was really difficult in the beginning. And I'm not joking when I tell you that he thought I was having some type of emotional breakdown and that this would go away. That my curiosity and desire to write would go away. And he realized that it wasn't going to go away because I used to wake up prior to that. I traveled all over the world. I would write at night. I would write in every city I was in. So to prove my point, 2 weeks after I resigned from PR Newswire, I printed 600 pages of writing. And it wasn't journaling. I had basically written summaries of every trip, just for my own pleasure of basically summarizing my experiences. So when he saw the writing that had been going on our entire marriage without him knowing, he realized, oh my God, who are you? Why didn't you tell me about this? And I've met so many other writers that are closeted writers. And we just don't share the writing because we think it's not good enough or not smart enough or how can I find space for this? So you're absolutely right. The conversation was a candid one. And today, right now, he's at the visitor center with my 5-year-old. He ended up quitting his job last year so that he could travel with me and support Practical Genius. So we go from not understanding to resisting to not only do I understand and get it, I love the message, let's live and kind of curate our life in a non-traditional way, and I'm going to do this with you. So it's great when you have supportive spouses matter. They do. And ladies, at-home dads, rock. Prerequisite for success. Any other questions? Could tell it's research. You guys have such great questions. Are we good? That was a lot. So each one of my modules is a 2-hour training. So we just speed coached through, but I really appreciate it. I'm going to sign books and we can continue the conversation. I would love to continue the conversation. Anyone want to contribute to the model? Any feedback? No, we're good? Thank you.
Thank you.